Lep pozdrav vsem skupaj. Glede na to, da smo zbrani že v precej velikem številu, mislim, da ni zadržkov, da ne bi začeli z nocojšnjo okroglo mizo. Kot predvidevam že veste, je to še uradni otvoritveni dogodek, kakor mi je znano, je nekaj ogrevalnih dogodkov sicer že bilo za festival Tinta. Je pa to seveda zgolj prvi v seriji še številnih drugih zanimivih dogodkov, tudi Kate Evans bo mogoče v naslednjih dneh še večkrat poslušati in na Vodnikovi domačiji in v soboto v Kino Šiški. Pa tudi sicer ogromno enih zanimivih stvari, ki se jih lahko udeležite. Namesto, da jih naštevam, vas vabim, da si tamle pri izhodu vzamete festivalski urnik in se sami odločite, kam bi se še podali. Zdaj bom preklopil na angleščino, kakor je bilo napovedano, bo pogovor v angleščini. Upam, da je to vsem sprejemljivo. V primeru, da ima kdo težave z angleščino, bomo pa poskušali kakšen improvizirani simultani prevod urediti. Ampak, če teh težav ni, we will now continue in English. So, again, welcome to tonight's opening event of the Tinta Festival. As you've seen, the title of this roundtable is From Red Rosa to Calais Jungle. And as you've already also probably noticed, we are in a bit reduced composition. Our friend Miha Blažič and Toko had to cancel last minute due to illness, but I'm confident that we will not run out of interesting subjects to discuss. Perhaps we will even be able to prolong the discussion with the public this way. So we decided to initially have a presentation prepared by Kate, where she will introduce us into her work, her opus until now. And after that, we will have a discussion also with Aigul Hakimova. Yeah, the floor is yours, Kate.
Hello. Thank you for coming. I apologize for my lack of Slovenian language, but not all of my words, well, not all of my comics need words to understand.
You need to get a copy of Red Rosa out to the page.
So I thought if I give a presentation of 25 years worth of work in 10 minutes, then it will make me look very productive. So this is my very first cartoon, 1994, and it was inspired by dieting advertising of the time, which said, "Can you pinch more than an inch?" I was like, yeah, okay. But around this time, I became involved in environmental activism, and I considered myself an activist first and a comics person second. Here are some photographs of the protests that we were involved with, which involved making homes. So we were making our homes in trees, and then they were being cut down, and they were building motorways. This is a confrontation with a protester being evicted from a tree. And these are my cartoons for the Guardian newspaper, which were explaining and also humanizing the mechanics of the protest that was happening at the time. And this is another one, again, about the moment of the eviction. But as well as this, I was inspired to make more general comics artwork about capitalism, about social injustice, and about all kinds of current affairs, because it's not just as simple a question as saying no to things. I want to be able to explain what it is that we say yes to as well. So this is an early comic which references climate change, which is about money, which is about the link between money and climate change. Teach them for the future to make money their pleasure, though there may be no future sold out to the now. And in 2000, I wrote a book called Funny Weather We're Having at the Moment, Isn't It, Dear? Everything You Didn't Want to Know About Climate Change but Probably Should Find Out. So I've learnt a bit about writing shorter titles since then. And this was explaining the mechanics of climate change. Again, this is a really difficult subject to make funny. But I finally hit upon the idea that there are climate modelers. They are scientists who create mathematical models of what happens to the climate. And I thought, what if they're making real models and they have glue and wood and sand and they're trying to make physical models? And from that, I came up with the idea that you can use comics to represent very complicated scientific phenomenon, and at the same time make it funny as much as you possibly can. Like, here is a crazy scientist making our hockey stick graph look less ominous than it really is, although it is. I was inspired by current events to make comics against the war. This is about the invasion of Iraq. I said it was a bad idea at the time. And then I had a baby, and I did this. And I genuinely was wearing a hat that says Mother Trucker at the time. So I wrote a book about breastfeeding, but the publishers told me not to put this picture in it because they said it gave a very bad impression of my attitude to child safety. Oh yeah, that didn't go in either. I've just put all the comics in here to be as provocative as I can, really. I have some boring ones too, but... So this was the book about breastfeeding. Oh yeah, okay, so this is the kind of thing that people think that comics artists do. This is not me, yeah? But I feel very strongly that if we're going to talk about superheroes, I know some real life ones. Wherever noses need wiping, nappies need changing, homework needs helping, my Thor is there. My Thor banishes hunger. She restores hygiene. She battles the forces of chaos and attempts to present a vaguely passable state of affairs to the school authorities. Please return this paper to the school by last week. So then I was inspired to write a book about pregnancy, fertility, and birth. It's a book with a lot of different endings. You can go to the chapter that you want. You can go to the chapter about natural birth, or you can go to the cesarean section. Nobody is judging. And these are some... I thought I'll put these all in here for the beginning of the conversation, because this is a genuine superhero, yeah? Okay? People have these superpowers. I want to celebrate them. Then this brings me to Red Rosa. Now, Rosa was published 2 years ago exactly, and my life's changed quite dramatically since then, because this is the first book that I wrote that has been really successful. I mean, I'm still not rich, or even halfway rich, but it's really like there's 11 foreign editions of Rosa, of the book. So it's the story of Rosa Luxemburg in graphic biography. It was an amazing subject to be given because Rosa Luxemburg, I mean, you can forget Asterix the Gaul. Rosa Luxemburg is truly indomitable. She is absolutely, I mean, okay, the book doesn't have a happy ending because she doesn't manage to overthrow global capitalism and save us from the horrors of 20th century German history, but she has a really good try. So I get to write about capitalism and I get to write about the resistance to it, and I have this incredible main character who she was a massive socialist nerd, and this is a representation of her relationship with Leo Yorgash's resisting capitalist annexation and imperialist war is not the same thing as dismantling capitalism. One does not flow from the other. Why this slavish adherence to Marx's dictates? Question everything. It's basically how to make socialism sexy, which she did. Like, this is not her first or last lover. And I'd like to accompany this with some of Dr. Luxemburg's actual words, because there's not much point me describing what she does as well as her describing what she can herself.
Just look over your shoulder.
So Anej here is going to be Dr. Rosi Luxemburg. May have had a sex change. We won't comment.
Big shoes to fill. Ok, ne moremo si predstavljati česa preprostejšega in bolj harmoničnega, kot je to življenje tako imenovanih primitivcev. Zakaj? Zaradi skupne lastnine zemlje. Ti, ki delajo, skupaj posedujejo produkcijska sredstva.
No, you're out the next page.
Okay.
Over there.
Ista vas, toda tokrat v modernih časih. Skupne lastnine ni več, zaradi česar ni več skupnega dela in skupnega upravljanja. Imamo denarno ekonomijo. Vsi medsebojni odnosi temeljijo na menjavi. Kaj to pomeni? Zdaj je vsak zase. Kmet, čevljar, gosi pastir in tako dalje. Skupnost mu nima več kaj reči. Nihče mu ne more ukazati, kaj naj dela, za vse, nikomor pa tudi ni mar za njegove potrebe. Trg določa prispevek vsake osebe v družbenem delu. Delo vlaga v karkoli, kar lahko proda. Če proda, je nagrajena. Če ima srečo, lahko kupi večerjo, če ne, se lahko tudi obesi, družbeni mar. Družbeno bogastvo se ne razdeljuje več glede na potrebe. Trgu je vseeno, koliko ust mora nahraniti posamezni delavec. Prej enovita skupnost je razbita na posamezne delčke. Vsak človek lebdi v zraku, kakor prašni delec, in se sprašuje, kako bo preživel. Morda vprašate, mar ni podreditev kapricam tega majhna cena za posameznikovo svobodo. Ojej, kako nesvoboden je ta delavec tukaj. Značilnost kapitalizma je prekarnost delavstva. Kapitalist nadzira produkcijska sredstva. Delavec nima ničesar. Edino, kar lahko prodaja, je lastna delovna sila. In celoten proces se odvija okoli izkoriščanja te sile. Delavec se morda lahko ima za svobodnega, toda kaj razen svoje delovne sile pa lahko ponudi? Služb je malo in so negotove, saj ima kapitalist pripravljeno rezervno vojsko brezposelnih, ki bodo hlastnili po njegovi ponudbi. Kapitalist se ima vsekakor za svobodnega, a kakšno izbiro ima, razen bolj pritiskati na svojo delovno silo, da veča svoj dobiček. Če ne plava pred konkurenco, potone. Celo človeštvo trpeče ječi pod jarmom slepe družbene moči kapitala, ki ga je samo nezavedno ustvarilo. Dejanski smotr vsake družbene oblike proizvodnje, zadovoljevanje družbenih potreb je popolnoma obrnjen na glavo. Proizvodnja ne služi več ljudem. Proizvodnja za voljo dobička postane norma po celem svetu.
I could not have read that. Thank you. She is just awesome. So this brings us to threads, which is probably going to be the subject of most of the conversation this evening, but I haven't put a great deal of the book into this presentation. It's the story of 10 days in which I visited the Calais Jungle. That's 3 different visits between October 2015 and March 2016. And I came back from the 3rd visit, and then I went on this first visit for a weekend, and I wrote a blog post, which became a 16-page comic. And then I went on a 2nd and 3rd visit and came back and wrote a 176-page graphic novel, because a lot happened and it seemed really important to capture this one historical moment and find a way of publicising what's happening. This is from the very first blog post, and it's quite rough. The artwork is quite quick, but I wrote it over a short school holiday. The children were off to school, and I had to write it and tell them to watch telly, and I just felt I had to get this down on paper. Today, we're helping to build shelters with a limited number of hammers, 8-foot square plastic shacks. It's better than a tent. Shabab is here alone. He's 12. The same age as my son. He's growing up far too fast. He doesn't look sad, but I never see him smile either. We help him build his house. He's competent with a hammer and over-enthusiastic with the staple gun. My son wouldn't know how to use a hammer unless it was on Minecraft. I give him some grapes out of a maternal concern for his vitamin intake. I feel an urge to scold him for treading down the backs of his shoes, but then I realise that everyone does it. It's a sandal-wearing culture. That'll change when winter starts to bite. So that's where we're at. And I'm more than welcome to talk about any aspects of any of my work with the discussion. But first we have some structured ideas.
Okay, thank you very much. To give you a few minutes, I will now ask Aigul. You have dealt in social center ROK first on many issues that were not really adequately, if at all, represented in Slovenian public or Slovenian media. For example, I remember Social Center ROK was among the first to really start talking about the precarious workers, the immigrant workers, and I believe this was the first initial push then, that enabled some more critical journalists in mainstream media to push these themes forward. Could you, before we start discussing the current refugee crisis, perhaps talk about a bit what are the challenges you were facing when dealing with the ignorance of the state and the state apparatus, the lack of taking responsibility, and how is it possible to push through an agenda that everyone seems to want just to ignore?
Thank you very much, Kate, for your introduction and for inviting to this event. To tell the truth, after living in Slovenia for more than 17 years, I should recognize that I have finally become a very old activist, you know. That's how people recognize me and they invite me to this kind of round tables. I'm very lately, especially, often invited to different international conferences. So I do recognize myself as an old activist. So slowly I should go away from this my position, I guess. But anyway, as Anej said, well, it was a kind of education, you know. Sometimes you just respond to a certain type of crisis in your local society or in your broader society, but sometimes you learn how to be an activist. So I guess these both things are somehow connected. And I should be very honest because I started working with people from Slovenia on different issues that were completely marginalized in a broader society in terms of kind of giving a voice to those voiceless and giving visibility to those who are invisible, actually, you know. So sometimes I question myself, why do we have to always work with margins, you know? So, okay, left wing, especially radical left wing people, they are on margins, but those people on margin work with much more marginalized people, you know, who are not even seen in public and in these things. But this was a great tool for empowerment and emancipation on the other side, because it wasn't just a kind of a simple, ritualized everyday life, but it was a challenge. It was, I always say this word, gegendewand methodology. Sometimes we were smart and planned something together, but most of the time we answered to injustice that happened in our local community or in with our friends who are mostly without papers or erased or migrants or homeless or precarious workers, which is very now getting more and more, this precariousness. And I do this work from period to period. So we started working with one big group of people, and then we started it's called mapping, you know? You map. You become a kind of a little bit semi-professional and semi-informal in a way that you know, and from time to time you find out in your own methodology. So it's easier to work, you know, to open up this kind of question, to make this problem very visible, to organize something and all these things. So this was the part how we started, but the biggest, I guess, response and challenge was this late media call it a refugee crisis, current refugee crisis, which is actually very permanent, I guess, because, you know, we have to be aware that maybe the massive movement of people from south to the north, it was also the consequences of war, but in general, there is a kind of terminology, we call it autonomy of migration, you know. So it's been always, you know, we now have this kind of Balkan route. You know, crusaders, they were going down, you know, and they are coming back, but by land, just through the Balkans. And the part of this Balkan route is called Balkan Corridor, you know, which happened in 2015. And 2 years ago, in 2015, in autumn, I was standing here when great girls, they had an event, it was called Loud for Refugees, Glasne za bjegunce. And we were crying, because this was just the beginning of the story, you know, 2 years ago, when this Balkan route corridor was open and then closed, and a lot happened. I feel like maybe 100 years passed in these 2 years, because, you know, your brain needs some space, so you erased a lot of things in order to make some kind of territory here to store some new information. So it was very like snowball in these last 2 years, and actually we are in the moment that we have even maybe a little bit, we've put aside the political forms of organizations, but mostly working with people, adjusting our lives to new politics of friendship, and trying to build up a kind of more convenient, safe space for our new friends, while on the other side, the critical point of mobilization is a little bit like suffering. Everybody knows, especially Ljubljana is very small, so there are 285,000 people living inside, and we have maybe 300 refugees. It's completely ridiculous numbers, because Slovenian asylum policy in years starting from 1999, let's say. Let's forget now those refugees who came after the Balkan War, because I guess it was historically a little bit different moment, but just look at the number of asylum and refugee papers, statuses given to people, it's very less, it's less than 500. So, but anyway, I guess just because of this doesn't exist, or it's kind of still a baby society I've been to Amsterdam like 3 days ago, and I really see that Slovenia is just getting into the new, I would say, experience of opening up itself, its society, its habits, its organizational forms, its plan, budget, and everything towards they say newcomers. Maybe later I could talk specifically on what we have done, but this is for the beginning, I guess.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will let you continue in just a second, but perhaps a short comment from my side. I remember 2 years ago when this so-called refugee crisis hit Slovenia through the whole Balkan Peninsula. what I found really striking is the public and media discourse accompanying the refugees, and there were some common threads. Mainly, the language used was usually some kind of aquatic discourse, so to say. So we were talking about the flood, the flow, the influx of refugees, and in a way the countermeasures were perceived as a kind of dam building to stop this kind of depersonalized horde that is posing a certain threat to our lifestyle, to our core as such. I mean, this is of course the most extreme example, but watered down a bit. One could find it in government documents. For example, I remember reading one document about the future budget perspective of Slovenia in regards to public deficit and public debt. And bear in mind that Aigul just said that there are around 300 refugees in Ljubljana only. But in this document, it was with all seriousness written that there are certain problems to Slovenian budget, like for example the banking debt, and then there are also the refugees that could also pose a serious budget threat. So although I'm talking about this extreme discourse in a more, in a way, sterile forum, it is also present in the government documents as such. So I was also wondering to what extent was this a motivation for you to do this?
I do use the metaphor of refugees as a flood in two places in my book. Just to come back to a point that Aigul said, I agree with you that the word crisis is problematic for discussing migration, because crisis implies that there's a solution. It implies a period of short duration where something comes to a head and then there is a change, and that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing an ongoing situation. But if I'd said threads from the refugee situation, nobody would have understood what I meant. So I had to use the terminology, but I do find it problematic. So I use the idea of threads, of floods, of refugees twice. At the beginning, when I'm talking about people at Calais, I try to place the numbers of people there into perspective. The Calais Jungle was a camp that's been demolished and is now probably going to be rebuilt, but because the situation hasn't been solved. But it was called the Jungle, which was as a translation of the word wood, which was used by some Afghan people who were living there. So the word wasn't put on the place, it came from the place. And in a way, there was a suitability to it because it was a place that existed outside the law. So the British media demonises the jungle and puts a lot of scary stories in front of the British people saying, it is the people from the jungle. You can imagine the tone of the reporting. So I was trying to sort of put this in context and say, politicians call them a flood, but of the millions of people around the world fleeing for their lives, this is just a trickle. It's like 5,000 to 10,000 people. That's not a lot of people when there are 60 million refugees worldwide. But then later on in the book, I make an attempt to explain the mechanics of people smuggling. And I say, well, at this point, let's resort to that dubious metaphor of refugees as a flood. And I give an illustration of a basin of water with a tap turned on, as though that is, and all the words are then filling the basin. And the problem is the water is still going to flow. You can put a dam in place. You can line your borders with razor wire. You can move the British border across onto French soil, and you can shoot people on you can let them sink in the Mediterranean and you can shoot them on the Turkish border and the Hungarian border for that matter. You can do all of that, but it's not going to stop the tap flowing. It's not going to stop the flow of people. And that's why this whole idea of a dam, all it is doing is making people more desperate. And in economic terms, what happened in the UK is that they introduced legislation about 5 years ago whereby, it was far longer than that, it was about 8 years ago, whereby if a driver is caught in the UK with an illegal migrant, an illegal person inside their vehicle, then they're fined £2,500, approximately €2,500 since Brexit. Used to be more. So, used to be about €4,000, never mind. Anyway, the point is, we set a minimum price. That is now the price on a person's head. You have to spend at least €2,500 because that is the amount for the fine.
Okay, and another striking thing in this so-called refugee crisis, to stick to this term, was not just the discursive response of the government, of the official political bodies. It felt in a way, in a bizarre way that any humanitarian tendencies a person or a group of people felt toward refugees were dealt with this cynical remark: if you care so much about them, then take them home. And one Slovenian artist, Arjan Pregel, had a fantastic retort to that. In a way, if you have a heart condition, then operate yourself. If you want a road, then build it yourself. I mean, and for me, it was a great twist of this logic that privatizes all of social ills and tries to pin them on a person. And I mean, there were very cynical, very aggressive theories about refugees being some kind of undercover jihadists, people full of money that just, I don't know, want to infiltrate this society and cause havoc. And
somebody stopped me at an event recently and said, but what if they're undercover? What if they're undercover ISIS people? What if? And I went, 8,500 people drowned in the Mediterranean last year. Have a look at relative loss of life before you start calling people murderers. Yeah,
and I think there's also another perspective that in a way enables us to understand this, I would also say very desperate, very people feel being pushed in a corner, and it seems to me that also because of the ongoing financial crisis, because of the cuts in public sector, in social security, and all that stuff, it seemed like that there is someone who is even worse off and can be someone on whom we can release all of our frustrations, and someone from whom we also need to clearly distance ourselves in order not to sink on an even more critical social economic situation. So it seems to me that governments were quite eager to exploit this, at least implicitly, if not explicitly, that okay, your situation is not the best, but look here, these people are even worse, and if we do not... I mean, Orban was totally explicit about that. He was like, yeah, if we will take in refugees, we will not have for social security for Hungarians, for the decent Hungarians.
I mean, there's two threads of argument that holds this up. One is that within the terms of capitalism, it doesn't, okay, within capitalism's own terms, immigration borders don't actually make sense, because if you remove barriers to migration, then global gross domestic product, that would improve. And they've modeled it as being between 50 and 150%. So you could round that out and say it would double. Because it doesn't actually make any economic sense to stop people moving from somewhere where they can't move productively to where they can. And Europe has an aging population. We're facing a situation in which there will be more and more old people, fewer and fewer people of working age paying tax. When Germany lets in 100,000 refugees, they didn't do that out of charity. They did that because it makes economic sense. There is also the fact that if you remove barriers to migration, then that then has an equalizing effect around the globe, because the amount of money that people send home to poorer nations, it dwarfs the global aid budget by a factor of 3. So there's 3 times as much aid going home from people saving money and sending it back to their sister in their home village than there is from any charity or NGO trying to redistribute wealth on our behalf officially. So there is a potential equalizing effect, but within the terms of capitalism, it doesn't make any sense for there to be borders. So it would seem like this is a winnable argument, but you have to radically change the narrative, because the only people the bankers have to blame are the immigrants. They are the bogeymen. They are the thing that they hold up in front of people. And it comes down to the story of the banker and the worker and the immigrant. And there's 10 biscuits, 10 cookies on a plate. You know this one. Yeah. And the banker takes 9 of them and turns to the worker and says, watch out, he wants your biscuit.
Perhaps, I mean, the argument I tried to develop earlier about the state as such, trying to, in a way, extrapolate any humanitarian or humane, for that matter, treatment of people in dire need, the refugees. What was the situation down on the ground when, I mean, I can imagine you met a lot of people, have seen the situation on the border when the barbed wire, the razor wire has been constructed. Was state's response anything else than these razor blades and military and policemen, or was this the primary focus?
Well, Slovenian reaction was very specific, of course, and if you look at the coordination, organization of this mass movement after the closure of the Hungarian border, we should say a few good words about this Croatian, how to say, government. Yeah, they made it better than Slovenian. Because our minister, you know, Vesna Gjorka Žnider, I think she went to see the borders once. Only once, you know, on this. And it was a very, like, disappointing moment. And I don't know, or it was just, you know, I guess Slovenian bureaucracy has this, I'm sorry for saying this, has this nature of being a little bit slow, you know. And it takes really ages. It takes ages, for example, to solve one case of one asylum seeker from Afghanistan.
We have that in the UK
6
too.
years, 7 years.
I believe it's an indication of national efficiency, and in the UK, I think it's just policy.
Yeah, and it's, you know, people, even in our public administration, people, they don't have to speak any other language than Slovenian. This was the last news today, I guess. Dnevnik published this. And Croatian government, it was like, it opened the borders, people were coming inside, and Slovenia was thinking, what to do? And there were already 30,000 people on different bus and train stations in Croatia. And then this, I like this, and this guy, who was by that time Minister of Interior, he just sent 20,000 people on Green Miles in one night, and it's been a freezing night. So this was a kind of, I guess, for us, you have some moments in history that can open your eyes, and this was the moment when we were like, now we know how it functions, and when our people, they won basket, European basket, we say, now we know what happened. So, and then when the Catalonia happened, you see the response of Slovenian intellectual public, how to say, elite or people, and then you say, now I know where do I live, this is how we find out how this state and society functions. I a little bit forgot, because it was said, it was completely like hysteria, media hysteria and everything, but I wanted to say a few things what is going on now, because more than 1,000 people asked for asylum in 2016, but only maybe, because plus relocation program, it's too much technical details. We don't have to go inside, actually. And just a few were approved, and a lot of people, they just escaped to the north, to France, to Germany, wherever they want. What is now actually going on is the integration of those who are here. And I should say one more thing, that if there wouldn't be some people, like ordinary people, who have no connection to any structures, to any institutions, this could not, we are activists, we are working in squad, and we have a kind of our own vision of integration and all these kind of things, but we should appreciate that actually the small part of society is responding to the acceptance, So I just wanted to say, because I'm also a kind of, I came here to live, that we here in Ljubljana or in Slovenia, I don't know, somehow perceive the integration as a project, Sometimes we would like to see, refugees, migrants, asylum seekers, that integration is not a project, but integration is a kind of dual communication among different people or between two people, So, and what I wonder about Slovenian families and Slovenians in general, that they do not invite refugees to dinners. They do not invite migrants to weddings. They do not invite them into their own families. They do not open them and show them their lives, Oh, come on, invite your grandmother's home, eat this beef soup and green salad together, go to Šmarna together, do this. So this is actually lacking, because integration is somehow perceived, yes, some people do, not everything, is perceived as, yesterday we were talking about it, it's kind of a project. And to tell the truth, it's a little bit hard then, to perceive. So, and on the other side is, but I think this media production image of a migrant refugee, of a Muslim boy, is actually taken from these social networks and all these worldwide media houses, and it's just reproduced here, I think we don't have here in Slovenia a single life experience that is showing a kind of frustration or fear, Usually it's taken from different European countries and from European cities and put inside like a news, in a way, this kind of. So I think we need both, a good experience and maybe not so good experience on the other side. And we really don't have to push ourselves forward in everything we know, I think we need also a little bit more sustainable things because everything is made by, it's very new, it's very fresh, there is no experience, there is no history. There is, but it was a bit different because it was people from ex-Yugoslavia. But now we just need to stop developing so fast and just, take a kind of another angle on this refugee crisis and all these things, including kind of new approaches, I would say, especially in terms of finding jobs and employing people who need this, This is very important.
Have you heard about the neoliberal response to the refugee situation in Lebanon? Because 1 in 5 people in Lebanon is a Syrian refugee. They're talking about building special enterprise zones with no workers' rights, where they can employ people making factory items for IKEA and for other major corporations. And this is trying to be put into place. Like, they can see these large migrant populations. They can see that they're living lives where they're not allowed to be equal citizens with the rest of the country. And so they will deliberately target and exploit them on behalf of corporations. I know it's not an exact parallel, but when you look at the way that corporations used the slave labor in Nazi concentration camps, there are some echoes there.
Yeah, I mean...
I just want to say that, for example, Calais, okay? Yeah. It was, we have seen, thousands of really, really, really bad pictures ever, maybe in Europe, about Calais and this Mediterranean, thousands of people dying and all these things. When it's a little bit metaphoric, but when there is a migration and the movement, quite massive, they do move and they do somehow žrtvovati, kako se reče?
Plan?
Yeah.
To sacrifice.
To sacrifice, So if we take it organically, we see that this movement is going on. We shouldn't be all the time very sad about all these really bad pictures we have been witnessing, especially late 2 years. We should somehow recognize the power of these small dots on European continent. Idomeni, Serbia, I don't know, a lot of different detention centers, all Europe, Calais, pop-up camps, we say, self-managed camps, self-organized spaces. This is something very intrinsic and permanent to this. It's very popular to say, to these current capitalistic forms of production, So I think these two things are going together. And we should, for example, there is Uninomada, one group in Europe, and they are somehow researching the migration from this point of view, looking very good, very powerful, not victimized points. So what I liked, this is what we did in social center. When we saw that there is a small organized group that is going to fight and open up one problem, we were like, yes, thanks God, let's do it together. It's perfect, it's good, And not like, oh, you are very victim, we will help you, we will be your service. Yes, you need job, you need flat. Yeah, you don't speak our language, we should help you, we should do this. But come on, if you don't have paper and if you want to go forward to Germany, go. Don't be a victim here, don't be a paperless here. If you have this possibility to survive, not in Slovenia, but in another country, just go. So we shouldn't stop them on one side. We should help, not only them, but ourselves as well. And somehow respect the freedom of their movement.
The temporary autonomous zones, the self-organized nature of the camp is something that I found familiar about the Calais Jungle and Dunkirk camps, and also I don't want to romanticize the situation there because it was very dehumanizing and extremely unsafe, and there were rats. There were a lot of rats. That was bad. But the self-organized nature of it was something that I was pleased to be able to record, because that has always happened throughout history and will continue to. So I was quite pleased to be able to make a historical document of the extent of it. There's things like we were sitting around in like a restaurant in the Calais Jungle, and it was like, it had a name on the side. It said, "This is the 3-star hotel." And we were like, this place is cool. We are going to give it 5 stars. We are going to go on TripAdvisor and we are going to write a review of this.
Great. I just remembered another interesting theme, so to say, that surfaced just recently when Slovenian basketball team won the European Championship. But something that accompanied this championship, a part of the sport euphoria and everything that goes with it, this historic win, was a bizarre discussion some people had about the how to say Slovenianness of the members of the basketball team, because for example, one player was from the States, a naturalized American, and it was not difficult for him to get papers, and because of his talent, he was quickly appropriated.
You've just pointed out a real problem with my future of a world with no borders, is how are we going to have international sporting championships? Oh, damn it. That would really suffer. Let's all go to the country where they win and try and get on the national team. I mean, in every other way, I hope that history will look back and judge our current obsession with controlling the influx of people in and out of various nations as a kind of horrendous apartheid. And really, can I just talk about no borders for a bit longer?
You can, but just let me finish this argument. I just wanted to reply that we can always have Hunger Games.
Yeah, that would be fine, yeah.
It seems appropriate, the progress the world is making. Well, about the basketball team. What I basically wanted to say was that it's kind of striking historical intervention that one of these players' father was among the Slovenian erased population. I don't know how much you know about that, but this is one of the most tragic, shameful episode in independent Slovenian history. A bunch of people basically lost their citizenship because of some administrative measures. One of the father of these basketball players was among the erased. So it just shows that what is foreign, what is who is a refugee, what is perceived as a threat, can, in a certain timeline, be then hailed and congratulated and, I don't know, in a totally different perspective, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on Rosi Luxemburg's life, it suddenly got a real insight into the freedoms that we've lost with our current obsession with national borders. Like, passports only became compulsory in the UK with the First World War. So up until that point, the UK was a haven for political thinkers, which is why Karl Marx was there. But Luxemburg, so she's born in Zamość in Poland in 1871. She's growing up in Warsaw, and she's becomes involved in socialist politics. Now, it's not possible to But socialism is illegal. Tsarist Russia occupies Poland, and socialism is illegal. This is problematic for Rosa Luxemburg because she's like about 1 meter tall, and she's got a gold tooth and an obvious limp, and she's Jewish and she's female. She's really bloody obvious, yeah? So the secret police are onto her more or less straight away. She gets smuggled out of Poland and she goes to Switzerland, which is the only country in Europe where a woman can graduate from university, and she gets herself a doctorate. But then, solving the long-term solution for what to do next, she marries her landlord's son, her landlady's son, in a Swiss register office. She waves goodbye to him on the doorstep of the registry office. She never sees him again. It's completely a marriage of convenience. She is not even wearing clean clothes. I love her so much, yeah? But all she has to do is just go and marry someone, and then she's like, yeah, I'm German citizen, and that's problem solved. And you're just realising it's not that that's problem solved. The problem that we have is it's problem created. So to talk a bit more about the no borders thing, because I didn't really think about it that much before I started writing threads, because I thought, oh, well, there's those no borders activists who are having another demonstration, whatever. It's probably what I thought, yeah? But I didn't really think about it because so much of our identity is predicated on the idea of the nation state. I have a British passport. I have a British name, well, a Welsh name, but still. I have a British licence plates on my car, which my British driving licence, a British social security number. I have British legality. The idea of Britain not being my identity feels as foreign as if I was to take my skin off my body and go and hang it on a peg and walk around without it. But if 150 years ago someone had sat in this lecture hall and said, well, you know, women, they can do anything men can do. If they'd said, I don't see why we should prevent people with disabilities from being able to participate fully in society. If they'd said it's absolutely okay for two men or two women or two people who choose to define themselves as neither to embark on a loving relationship, you would have said I was mad. But the only big, legal and morally justified inequality that there is left is the idea that it's absolutely fine for me to be as rich as I am in my life with all of the opportunities that it affords me, but someone with my talent who's born in sub-Saharan Africa isn't allowed that. And the reason why they're not allowed that is because of the people standing at the borders with the passports and the guns.
Recently there was an article in the biggest newspaper, Slovenian, I think it was Dnevnik, when there is a Syrian family living in Zagreb for more than 5 years, and they wanted to send their son, who is a gymnasium student, very good one, with his classmates to Rome, like excursion, you know. Beautiful. Because, you know, people here are very used to travel all around Europe, especially when they are in high schools. They see actually the biggest capital cities of Europe, you know. But he was, when they came to Slovenian borders, Slovenian border police took him, got him off the bus. And he didn't go, you know. But the problem not in this very, I would say, horrorful act of police, the problem is in Schengen. Yeah? So I was in Amsterdam when we read this, and I was explaining to my friend that he was like, oh my God, this is again Slovenian, I don't know what, xenophobia, or whatever. I said, just please give me a second, I will explain you what happened to this guy, because we are foreigners, we know what happened to us when we crossed the border without passports. This Syrian young guy, he didn't possess Syrian passport, right? And if you are a citizen of a third country, which is Syria, whole Central Asia, whole Asia, everything, even United States is third country because Schengen is Schengen. If they do not have passport, but they have Croatian passport, which is kind of permission, they cannot pass Schengen borders. Never. I cannot pass any of Schengen border only with my permanent card. I should always have valid passport of the so-called third country. That's why they took him off. So it was a mere bureaucratic Schengen check out. Check in, check out. This happened to this guy. So it will happen to everybody. Especially, how he will get Syrian passport. Maybe probably some Syrian consulates, embassies are still working, I don't know. In Moscow, definitely, I don't know, in those countries. So before they get Croatian citizenship, this boy cannot go to any European country unless he fixes his Syrian passport. Maybe he will go to Bosnia, I don't know, because Bosnia and Serbia are on the other side, No, he will, and his parents. So they will be living like 5 more years, and then they will get citizenship, and then voila, open Europe, everything you can see with one ID card.
You wanted to add something?
Do we get questions?
Yeah, I think we could open the discussion with public right now. So if you have any comments, questions, ideas, whatever you would like to share with us, now is the opportunity.
Before, when you were talking at the beginning about this flow and the opening of the Balkan corridor, I started to ask myself in 2015 whether is it possible that because we, especially in Slovenia, I don't know how is it with the other countries, we have quite a lack of knowledge about especially Middle East and also about Africa. Is it maybe possible that we still perceive Middle East as by the only thing we know from that area, and this is what we are learned in schools, which might also come into our unconsciousness, and this is the Ottoman Empire, the Turks that came and burned the villages and raped women, because this is the only thing we know. And I was wondering whether is this maybe some unconscious cultural historical memory that was brought to life because of this lack of knowledge about what is really going on at this moment in the Middle East.
I don't know about the Slovenian context with the Ottoman history. There seems to be a division in the racism of the presentation of the two types of refugees within the UK discourse, which is that the Middle Eastern refugees are all terrorists, whereas the African refugees are all savages and there's too many of them. So those are the two racisms that occur, and the problem also is that because the Syrian refugees tend to be more middle class and are able to say, well, I work as an oil company executive in my hometown, there is more sympathy. In fact, I've seen like in a presentation of my book the other day, someone was describing it as being about the Syrian refugee crisis, and I was like, it is not. It's about Afghans and Iraqi Kurds are the people who I actually meet, but I also massively gloss over the existence of Sudanese, Somalian and Eritrean refugees in large numbers at Calais. So people just want to talk about Middle Eastern people as being worthy of charity and have this idea that Africa's too much. Africa, we can't go there. And I find that there is a division like that. But for more Slovenian context, I'll let somebody who knows a lot more talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I guess, especially as you said, for example, if you, I don't know, I'm just giving one example that I know, because I was born in Soviet Union and Moscow was the capital of Soviet Union, So this kind of knowledge, but which was very, I would say, specific for scientists, for humanistične vede. So there is a lot of institutions, research centers that are devoted to Middle East because it has this empire ambitions, But Slovenia I also miss here, I really miss kind of a more, I would say, progressive knowledge production that will include also those regions, But we have quite a lot of people who have, like journalists, we have maybe dozens of people who deal with professionally, with like anthropologists, with this, and then poetry is now, this migrant literature is arising because people, after this big opening of these borders, when they pushed and opened the borders, people started also learning more about literature of other countries. Just before I forgot to say one thing, I think when we in our society, in media, when we hear the news that, Slovenia again rejected one asylum seeker, and we are like so sad, zgražamo se. We are very sad, The Slovenian government is not working. But for them it's not like this. I'm telling you again, this is a simple bureaucracy, Why these men with a lot of conditions and to receive asylum status didn't receive it because he didn't properly answer the question on his second interview, So it's so bureaucratized. So that's why we started working with new coming asylum seekers. Hey, please, on interview, concentrate, say this. I mean, we listen to his story and we say, don't say all other things, concentrate. You should be quite, educated. So if you, apart from difference, for example, Syria is 100% approved. And I guess it was kind of very tragic story from Syria. But for example, from these countries like Afghanistan, which are recognized as safe space, these people who possess maybe Afghani passports or no passport, but they say that they are from Afghanistan, they should be really creative, They should be so much creative in order to prove that they deserve refugee status. Because in last year, only 2 people from Afghanistan received refugee status in Slovenia. But if you are from Iran, you have to be much way creative to prove that you are eligible to asylum, to refugee status, And yes, Slovenian uradniki, public administration, maybe now better, but 10 years ago, when we had first asylum seekers who fled Kazakhstan under the pressure of Kazakhstan government, and they were followers of pure Islam, so-called, So these new coming sectas in Islam, 4 families, they received refugee status in here. And I was at that interviews of one of them, and there I found out that the people who we call them inspectors, so those people who decide if this person is eligible for refugee status, didn't know basic terms of Islam. But it was 10 years ago. Now they know. Now I think people are quite more educated because it's becoming a lot more popular, and it's spreading, And of course, this Al Jazeera mentality, it doesn't help us to, deepen our knowledge, because everything is going too fast, I guess, with this news circling.
Maybe any more questions, comments? Would you like to add some concluding thoughts?
I actually have another cartoon left at the end of this that I've just remembered. It's on the end of the presentation. With regard to bureaucracy on asylum claims, we have the same thing in the UK. People are brought in for an introductory interview and they say, oh, this is very quick. We don't want to go into detail. You just want to tell us a few simple facts, yeah? And so that's the introduction interview. If at a subsequent interview they talk about rape or other forms of sexual assault or torture or deep and difficult personal traumatic events, they are automatically disbelieved because they didn't mention it at the first interview, yet at the first interview they are told not to go into detail by the official taking the statement. So what person who's suffered deeply traumatic personal life events would volunteer them? They're obviously not going to say anything at that first interview because they've been told not to, yet when they say it later on, they're going, we don't believe you. Why didn't you say that the first time? Like, I kind of think that guy Kafka, I think he might have designed some of the systems involved. And from the perspective of people who are fleeing for their lives, what the West is doing is doubly cruel because we're not saying don't come. We're saying you can come, you can start a life here, you are entitled to it. We understand you're persecuted, we understand your situation is desperate. If you come here, it'll be okay. It's just that in the meantime, you'll get shot at the border and then you have to paddle across the Mediterranean in a child's toy and then you have to walk across the continent and then you have to hide on a lorry and then you have to jump under a moving train and then you have to come here and then you have to go through a series of incredibly dehumanizing and unsettling interviews in which you will be automatically disbelieved and all the most traumatic events will be taken out and passed in front of your eyes and you will have to take them to pieces and defend them and we'll make you live on less than £5 a day for 4 years of your life living in squalid and horrible rat-infested accommodation. Do all of that and then it'll be okay. Like, wouldn't it just be fairer to say fuck off in the beginning? Anyway, sorry.
So you're welcome if you're a superhero.
So the title of the talk that I vaguely put together to go with this was Comics for Change, talking about how comics can inspire change and talking about the different ways in which I try and create comics that do inspire change. And I put this cartoon on at the end and it doesn't have any words, so if you've been struggling with the language, this will be welcome for you. But I just put it in here just because I wanted to show how just a small thing can trigger a larger chain of events. What is happening?
Nice. Yeah, beautiful.
All this from one piece of Lego. Thank you very much.